So there are three components of this system. So the first component of the system is the Utah Standards for Educational Leadership. And we've already looked at that. We've already taken that. The standards are organized. Let me see. I think the next slide talks about that. Come on, let's move on. No, it actually doesn't. So let me go back. So the standards are organized into strands and standards, which is different from the way that we used to look at standards. We would have standards and objectives. Our school board a few years ago decided they wanted to have all of our standards have the same structure. So now the way that we're looking at them is that they have strands and then they have standards underneath those strands. Let me just quickly open up. I can just close this for just a second. And I'm going to open up. Oh, you don't need to see my hotel bill. Let me get rid of that. I'm just going to quickly open up the standards and just show you how they're organized. You've probably looked at them already, but just in case you haven't, let me just bring this up really fast. So this is what the cover looks like of the Utah State Standards for Educational Leadership. And if I go down to strand 1 right here, which is about visionary leadership, you can see that we have a strand right here. There's a strand. And then underneath that strand, there is a strand description. This is really the objective of visionary leadership. This is what we're looking for. We want our effective educational leaders to be able to facilitate the development, articulation, implementation, and stewardship of a shared vision that promotes each student academic success and well-being. And then underneath that, we have 5 standards that help us get to that strand statement. So each one of these standards breaks it down a little bit more about collaborating with faculty, staff, parents, and the community, school community to develop that system, that vision, using data to get to that vision, creating plans that include short and long-term goals, to developing a shared understanding and commitment to the vision within the school and community, and then monitoring and evaluating progress and revising plans. So that would be a school improvement plan. So that's the way that that looks. The way that we've organized the evaluation system, and now I'm going to get back to that, the way we've organized the evaluation system is that the strands are the important part of the system. And for summative evaluations, we are evaluating at the strand level rather than at the standard level. We're evaluating at the strand level. Well, let me show you how that would look. So this is our this is the first set. This is the first strand along with its standards that go underneath it. So some design principles that go along with this, we're going to talk about those in just a minute, but this is the second component. The first component is the standards. The second component is the rubric. Each strand has a rubric that relates to the standards. I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. The third component is there is a Utah Model Principle Evaluation System Handbook that is also available on that page that we talked about earlier. What that does is it describes the reasons why we've done what we've done, what the principles are that we've followed. It talks about how to do the 3 different parts of administrator evaluation, those 3 parts being leadership practice, which is the performance score that is required in state law and board rule. The second is student academic success, academic growth measures, and the third is stakeholder input. And we're going to get to all of those. So now we're going to take these three components and we're going to break them down to take a look at what we do. So first thing we're going to look at is these core design principles. So it's based on the Utah Educational Leadership Standards. It's built on 5 core design principles. The fifth principle has to do with the needed expertise of those who are doing evaluations. We're not going to talk a lot about that. It talks about that in the handbook, and so it just lets you know that those who do those evaluations have to be extremely familiar with what's going on in the school and have many opportunities to be in and around the principals and be working with them in order to do this evaluation. So that's the fifth design principle. Let's look at the other design principles. So the first one is, you know what? I don't have them here. You have to go and look at those. I'm sorry. We have to go look at those in the handbook. Um, Gosh, I can't hang on for just a second. Um, okay, here they are. I'm sorry. These are the core design principles. Let me just go back here real fast. So, first of all, one of the core design principles is that the evaluation system has to contain the 3 components that are required in state code and board rule. And those 3 components are leadership practice, which is the performance score, and that includes, by the way, effectiveness in evaluating employee performance. That was one of the caveats that was put into board rule. This is R277533, that principals are to be evaluated on their ability to evaluate performance, educator performance. And that is built into the rubrics in a couple of different places. So leadership practice includes that. The second one, as I just talked about, is student academic growth. And the third one is stakeholder input. So when the system was designed, we took into account those 3 parts that are required by law. The second core principle was that it has 2 portions to it. It's in nature, it has 2 purposes. And the first purpose, in all actuality, is more important than the second purpose, although the second purpose is important. But the first purpose is that it ensures that principals are continually improving their skills and becoming more and more effective. So that purpose of continuous improvement is accomplished as evaluators, as supervisors, meet with principals on a regular basis and are going through the standards, they're going through the system, and they're looking at what the principal is doing, and they're doing some coaching with that principal. We're going to talk about the dichotomy that we've always talked about between coaching and evaluating, if those 2 things are mutually exclusive. We're going to talk about that in just a second. But first of all, let's talk about that second thing of ensuring that principles are of the highest quality. Of course, that has to be part of an evaluation system. We have to be able to say our principals are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Um, is there a conflict between part A, the continuous improvement, and part B, the evaluation function? And the answer to that question is no. That dichotomy actually ends up being a myth. It's not, there is not that kind of a conflict, with a couple of caveats. Number one, there has to be a personal relationship between the evaluator and the person being evaluated. The person who is evaluating has to set the stage that their purpose as an evaluator is to help the principal to become more effective in their practice. And then they have to show that in their actions. Um, a while ago, actually it was last June, we had a principal supervisor conference. And we had one of the lead authors, in fact, the lead author of the studies funded by the Wallace Foundation about changing the role of the principal supervisors. And unfortunately, her name has just escaped me, but I'll think of it in just a minute. Ellen Goldring, there it is. One thing that she talked about was that in their study, what they found is that administrator or supervisors who are coaches to their principals are actually better evaluators because they have a much better idea of what is actually happening in that school. They've seen it from day to day. They have much more to evaluate the principal on, and therefore their evaluations are more valid and they are accepted better because it's that continuous improvement kind of idea. The same thing that we're trying to do with teacher evaluations. So that's one of our design principles. We want our principals to be continuously improving their skills and becoming more effective. And then we also want to ensure high quality. And part of that ensuring high quality is the idea of finding those who are having difficulty in their practice and giving them appropriate interventions, and then also doing the HR function, which is to either retain or dismiss principals who simply cannot function. And so we want to find those people and make sure that they don't just continue in the system. So that is our second design principle. Actually, the third when we think about the quality of the evaluator. So the next core principle is this, that it is based on the state's performance levels. So we had to build in the fact that we have from not effective, which is a score of 0, to highly effective, which is a score of 3. The nice thing that we've been able to do with this system is we've been able to say, if you're highly effective, then you are a model for other people to emulate. That's basically what highly effective behavior looks like. You're so good that other people ought to be doing the same things that you're doing. So that's highly effective. And of course, that's defined into much smaller grain sizes than that. If you're effective, that leads to strong student learning. And effective means that you are doing a very, very sound, very nice, very effective job as a principal. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It doesn't mean that you're not good if you aren't rated highly effective. Highly effective is going above and beyond what's expected of a principal. So effective, it's leading to strong student outcomes, you're doing a great job. If it's minimally effective, then that's performance that needs improvement. Then not effective, that's performance that cannot be allowed to continue. In the handbook, it further defines those four performance levels and gives you more information about how we look at what highly effective, effective, minimally effective, and not effective means. And so by sharing those with your principals, then they know what targets they're shooting for. And they also know that being rated highly effective is actually something that is not going to happen on a continual basis. It's really, really high performance, and there's nothing wrong with not being rated highly effective. It's not like an A. Anyway, I think I've said enough about that. So our next core design principle is one of, hang on, where's my cursor? There we go. Okay, is this. The way that the rubric is designed is that we don't have a rubric for every standard that are defined in the strands. There are simply too many standards for us to be able to create an evaluation system that allows us to have those conversations that lead to continuous improvement. So instead, we have combined standards. We have looked for high leverage kinds of actions that then are defined in the rubrics. Um, but the performance expectations that are in those rubrics are correlated to the standards, and those correlations are in the rubric so that we can see if we're looking at the first performance expectation under visionary leadership, we can see the standards that it's correlated to. Again, as I said before, summative measurement is at the strand level rather than at the performance expectation level. And I'll show you how that happens. And that formative assessment correlates to the standards that are highlighted in the performance expectations. So what it allows us to do is to look at a performance expectation in a formative sense and say, here are the standards that this relates to. And then we will have some links for you that that will be linked to professional development activities and materials that will help principals who are at a minimal level or a not effective level, that will help them to improve their performance. So that's where that correlation to the standards come in. So the standards are very important, but we're not evaluating every single standard when it comes to summative evaluation. We're looking at them formatively.